Haven't done one of these in a while, but today we're going to be ranking every chapter in A Storm of Swords, aka the most perfect book in the series. And as with the last two rankings, we're going to divide it into three tiers. We're going to have the okay tier, the good tier, and the great tier, but it's going to be a lot more lopsided this time because especially the second half of this book is just a home run after home run. All right, let's start with the okay tier, which is not going to be long at all. Number 82 is Tyrion 7. This is right before the Purple Wedding, where Tyrion rails Shay in front of the dragon skulls. That's basically all that happens. And this is better than most Tyrion Shay sex chapters because we know that it's the last one. Number 81 is Sansa 2. This chapter could basically be removed and the book would be exactly the same. Sansa is given the dress that she's going to wear at the wedding, and then she tells Dantos that she's going to be wed to Willis, and Dantos insists that she needs to leave with him instead. This is how Littlefinger finds out about this plan, and the Tyrion-Sansa marriage is arranged afterwards, but that's literally the only justification for this chapter, and it's like 5 pages long. 80 is Tyrion 4. This chapter has the presentation of the two swords that were reforged from ice, and it has Tywin's plan to have Janos Slynt become Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and that's okay, but this chapter also has the subplot where Tyrion murders Simon Silvertongue, which, unless I'm missing something, this is just completely irrelevant in the long run. I don't know, the King's Landing plot is really back-heavy in this book, and in the first half, not that much happens. Number 79 is Bran 1. This is one of those early chapters that just reintroduces the cast in that particular storyline and establishes what's going on and where they're heading. Bran has a wolf dream where he fights a pack, and back in reality, he, Hodor, and the Reeds are planning to go beyond the wall. Like I said, it's just setup. And speaking of which, number 78 is Arya 1. Same thing, just recapping where we left off in the last book. Arya escapes Harrenhal with Gendry and Hot Pie, and they're off to find the Trident. Arya also has a wolf dream as Nymeria, and those are going to be very common throughout the book. 77 is Jon 4. This is where Jon and the Wildlings scale the wall, and it's basically George trying to make that premise as realistic as possible because it really does strain credulity, especially since I forget where this happened, but I think it was when the show was starting that George realized 700 feet is actually way more than he imagined. So yeah, it's fine, I guess, but like given that we later learned there's a magic gate that only the Night's Watch can open, maybe they could have gone that way. That would have been interesting. Number 76 is Arya 3. Arya has the most chapters in this book, but I feel like a lot of the early ones could have been lumped together. In this one, we find out that Hot Pie decided to stay behind and become a baker, and now Arya and the Brotherhood are off to find Beric, and Arya learns about how they all ended up as outlaws. Again, it's perfectly fine, but there end up being like 3 or 4 chapters of Arya and company just wandering through the war-torn Riverlands. Number 75 is Davos 3. This is where Davos is in a cell. We meet his two guards, as well as Alistair Florent, who was deemed a traitor for thinking that they should surrender. Then Melisandre shows up and preaches about the Great Other. It's fine, but at this point we're just waiting for Davos to finally reunite with Stannis. Number 74 is Bran 3. This is where Bran and friends arrive at the Gift and Bran wargs into Hodor for the first time, which is horrifying in and of itself, but it's made worse when Bran doesn't really grasp how wrong that is. This chapter is mostly just set up for the Jon one right after, where Jon and Bran come very close to crossing paths. And just like that, we're already in the good tier. I told you that first one wasn't going to last too long. Number 73 is Tyrion 2. This is where he meets with Varys while he's still recovering from his injuries, and Varys basically confirms how grim his situation is. Tyrion manages to convince Varys to let him see Shay one more time. Again, King's Landing is mostly uneventful until Tyrion's wedding, but this one's a bit higher because Tyrion and Varys' interactions are always fun. Number 72 is Arya 4. This is another chapter of the Brotherhood wandering the Riverlands and interacting with the locals who support them. This chapter is mostly remembered for the Lady in the Lake, who straight up foreshadows the Red Wedding just a few hundred pages before it happens. I said in the last video that George must have been nervous about hinting at the Red Wedding in the House of the Undying in Book 2, and here he goes even further by having a very clear metaphor for Catelyn's dead body that even the most casual fan could connect, assuming they're paying attention. Maybe it would be less obvious if the Lady in the Lake didn't also use a metaphor for Stannis killing Renly in the same sentence. Other than that, this chapter has some banter between Arya and Gendry, which is always fun. I do love their dynamic, and I hope they bump into each other and wins again. Number 71 is Catelyn 1. This sets up the Riverrun storyline for this book. Catelyn is in prison for releasing Jaime and has to listen to her dying father keep talking about Tansy, which Catelyn thinks may have been some woman from long ago. It's only at the very end of the book that we find out it was Plan B for Lysa. Number 70 is Arya 5. This one is mostly world building in the Riverlands. We get the story of the Battle of the Bells, and we meet another of Robert's bastards at a brothel. It's good, but at this point we've been wandering with the Brotherhood for several chapters looking for Beric, and finally this chapter ends with him capturing Sandor, which pushes the story forward. Number 69 is Jon 6. This is the chapter where Jon returns to the Wall after escaping from the Wildlings. He's barely alive, but manages to warn the Watch that the Wildlings are attacking from the south. We get to see Maester Aemon again, which is always great, but this chapter is mostly just set up for the battles at the Wall in the later part of the book, and this is also the last chapter right before the Red Wedding sequence, so it kind of gets overshadowed by what happens right after. Number 68 is Davos 1. We find out that Davos survived the battle on the Blackwater, and this chapter is him on a rock, barely clinging to life. We get to experience his grief at the fact that most of his sons are probably dead, and he tries to figure out whether he should have done more to stop Melisandre. I do love how Davos doesn't just get rescued. The ship asks him which king he serves, and here Davos' loyalty comes in handy when he decides to be honest about his support for Stannis, and that turns out to be the right answer. It's a solid start to the Davos storyline, this book. Number 67 is Arya 2. This is where we meet the Brotherhood without banners, most notably Tom of Seven. It's a sharp reminder that despite everything Arya has done to get here, including murder, the three of them are just kids and don't stand a chance on their own. The Brotherhood is also fascinating because they were basically born from a decision Ned made in the first book that everyone has probably forgotten about, and then we hear about them a bit in the second book and we're not really sure what to make of them. And then all of this ties together where Arya sees Harwin at the end of the chapter. I love the detail that the inn that they stay at is the same one Jaime, Brienne, and Cleos were at just one chapter earlier, and I wonder if this close call is supposed to foreshadow the close call Arya has with the twins later. Number 66 is Jon 9. Every time I haven't read the series in a while, I start to think that maybe the fetch me a block scene in Dance is a tad overhyped, but then I reread the series and wonder why Jon didn't execute Janos Slynt way sooner. This is the chapter where Janos arrives at Castle Black and has Jon arrested, and he might actually dethrone Pycelle as the character I would most like to fight in real life. We also have the return of Alliser Thorne, who I've always thought was more complex than people give him credit for, even if he is very unlikable. The chapter is boosted a bit by the turtle sequence, which is the climax of the Battle of the Wall. Number 65 is Bran 2. This chapter is mostly just Meera telling the story of the Night of the Laughing Tree. It's a great story, and I love how George tries to make this lore dump seem natural, but if you're reading it for the first time, you might not catch who the characters in the story are, in which case this chapter does sort of seem like filler. But it's stuff like this that really makes me yearn for wins so that some of these mysteries can finally get solved. Number 64 is Catelyn 2. This is the chapter where Robb returns to Riverrun and we meet Jane Westerling. This kicks off the downfall of House Stark as Catelyn tries to understand what led Robb to do this. I try not to think about how the show butchered the storyline. Robb's honor being his downfall is just so poetic. This chapter is knocked down a few pegs because it also has the sequence where Robb and the Blackfish blame Edmure for defeating one of Tywin's hosts instead of just letting them pillage through the Riverlands so they could bait him away from King's Landing. This is one of those rare moments in the series where someone's actions are so bafflingly stupid that it almost comes off as bad writing, because apparently Robb was playing 4D chess and Edmure was supposed to just magically guess this. I do like the idea that Robb and Brynden had decided to make Edmure feel bad so it would be easier to convince him to wed a Frey later, but I just really hate how much Edmure gets dunked on in the series. It's not as bad as the show, but it's still pretty bad. Number 63 is Arya 7. This is where the Brotherhood kills Sept and Ut. It's hard to say which member of the Bloody Mummers is the worst, because you could make a case for basically any of them, but Sept and Ut is maybe one of the most disturbing ones, especially since his outwards persona isn't a mustache-twirling villain like some of the other ones are. This chapter also has Beric explaining how pieces of his personality and memory disappear each time he dies and comes back to life, which I thought was a really interesting passage, and I wonder how that'll fit in with Lady Stoneheart later. Number 62 is Daenerys 1. I'd say Storm is probably Dany's best book, and this chapter is a solid beginning for it. While most of it is set up with Jorah convincing her to go to Astapor and buy the Unsullied so she actually has an army aside from Dothraki barbarians, this chapter does unfortunately also have the scene where Jorah makes a move on her. Jorah, please stop. I also love the mystery of Arstan. Like, obviously now we know who he is, but it's fascinating to show how this is slowly peeled away, and we don't know if this is just Jorah being intimidated by another man, or if there's actually something off about Arstan. Number 61 is the prologue. This prologue is lower than that of the previous two books for a few reasons. One is the quality of chapters in this book is just that good, but the other is that Chet is one of my least favorite characters in the series, and his monologue is very unsympathetic. Not only does he relentlessly bully Sam, but there's also the story of how he got sent to the Wall because he gave a girl flowers and she wouldn't sleep with him, so he killed her. I love that detail that picking the flowers took him all morning. Chad's monologue aside, the chapter is solid. We learn about the plan for a mutiny at the Fist, and there is a growing sense of dread knowing that most of the good characters in the Night's Watch are about to get murdered in their sleep, only for George to pull a 180 with the 3 horn blasts signaling the arrival of the others. Enjoy not knowing if Sam survived or not for like the next 200 pages. Number 60 is Daenerys 4. This is the worst chapter in the series because Dany should have just taken the Unsullied and sent to Pentos or even Volantis, but instead she decided to liberate the rest of Slaver's Bay, and she's now been there for 25 years. I do like that Dany has to use a different strategy for each city in the bay she conquers, and Yunkai obviously is ready to fight and can't be outplayed the same way Astapor was. This is also the worst chapter of the series because this is where we meet Daario. On the bright side, Dany does tell Jory that she doesn't want him, and maybe now he'll finally get it through his head. He won't. Number 59 is Samwell 4. Sam returns to the Wall and we learn about the vote for Lord Commander, with Cotter Pike and Dennis Mallister being the frontrunners, and the growing threat of Janos Slynt maybe becoming commander. There's a lot of Wall chapters near the end of the book, and this chapter is a good setup for the frantic plot to stop Janos from gaining control of the Night's Watch. Number 58 is Jon 5. This picks up right after the Bran chapter at the Gift. Jon is finally forced to pick a side when the Wildlings tell him to execute a civilian. Jon is able to barely escape thanks to Summer appearing and saving him. It's a solid chapter, and I'm intrigued how the relationship between Jon and Bran may play out in the last two books, with the two of them almost bumping into each other here, and then Sam meeting Bran later and having to keep it a secret. Number 57 is Davos 2. This chapter follows Davos' plan to return to Dragonstone and kill Melisandre. We get an update on the state of the war from Salladhor Saan, who's a great supporting character, and I love seeing his and Davos' interactions. The chapter ends with Davos being arrested, and we're left to wonder if maybe Melisandre really can see the future. Number 56 is Davos 4. Finally, Davos is released from prison, and we get to see Stannis again. The relationship between Davos and Stannis is so layered, and I could read 100 pages of them just talking to each other. There's also Axel Florence's plan to become Hand of the King, but Stannis decides to just give the title to Davos instead, proving once again how little public opinion really matters to him. Finally, we get the scene with the leeches, and I love what a roller coaster that is because we're wary that Melisandre has some power, but suddenly she's like, let's magically kill Joffrey, and we're happy. And oh, let's kill Balon too, that's even better. And then the third leech is for Robb, and that leaves us with such an uneasy feeling. Number 55 is Samwell 1. We finally find out what happened at the Fist after basically assuming that everyone died. Samwell's internal monologue can be a bit grating with just how much self-loathing there is, but at least it's consistent with the character we've grown to know over the first two books. We get flashbacks to the slaughter at the Fist, Sam's success in sending the Ravens, and here we finally see that obsidian can be used to kill others, leading to the nickname Sam the Slayer. Number 54 is Jon 7. This is the first battle at the Wall against Styr and his group coming from the south. I like how the battle at the Wall is basically a long, drawn-out conflict and not just a one-night event like Blackwater was. It's cool seeing Jon leading the very small battalion left at Castle Black, and there's even the beginning of him mentoring Satin. Like, I used to think that Jon and Satin memes were blown out of proportion, but there's such a huge emphasis on him in this chapter in particular. Finally, this is the chapter where Ygritte dies, and while this is a huge blow to Jon, the fact that this chapter comes so soon after the Red Wedding this moment is a bit overshadowed. Number 53 is Arya 8. This is Arya's last chapter with the Brotherhood as it ends with Sandor capturing her. We get the news that Balon Greyjoy fell off a bridge, which not only throws a huge curveball into the war, as the Ironborn will be in disarray and there could be an opportunity for the Starks to regain their footing in the north, but then there's the dread as we realize Mel had just burned leeches and now one king was dead. Finally, this chapter also has Arya's conversation with Edric Dayne, and we get the unconfirmed rumors that Ned Stark and Ashara Dayne may have been friends. This, along with Edric mentioning that Willa was his wet nurse, harkens back to the rumors we heard about Jon's parentage in one of Catelyn's first chapters in the series. Number 52 is Davos 6. With the three kings from the Three Leeches dead, Melisandre basically declares victory and now wants to sacrifice Edric Storm to wake dragons. Whether this would have worked or not is anyone's guess because Davos decides to do the right thing and help Edric escape. Finally, he manages to convince Stannis to do the right thing as well by revealing the letter from the Night's Watch. I do kind of wish we had maybe gotten one more Davos chapter at the Wall because his plotline just kind of abruptly ends here. Number 51 is Arya 10. While the Red Wedding sequence is perfect, some of the individual chapters are going to be better than others, as was the case with the Blackwater sequence in Book 2. In this chapter, Arya and Sandor have arrived at the Twins and are basically trying to find a way in using the excuse of delivering food for the feast. It's pretty short as we're jumping back and forth between Arya and Catelyn, but the tension that is building up here at the idea that Arya may finally be reuniting with her family is just incredible. Solid chapter that makes up an absolutely perfect sequence. Number 50 is Samwell 3. This chapter has Sam and Gilly trying to reach the Wall after the mutiny at Craster's. We get a nice scene of Sam singing, followed by an attack from a horde of wights, including members of the Watch. This chapter also introduces Cold Hands, who is one of the coolest characters in the series, and he rides around on an elk. I mean, what could be cooler than that? Number 49 is Daenerys 6. This chapter opens with us finding out that Meereen has been captured, Barristan and Jorah get judged, and it's really cool finally seeing Barristan's motive and how he was cautious about supporting Dany because of the very real possibility that she was insane just like her father. And then Jorah gets banished when Dany pieces together that he saved her from being poisoned because he knew there would be an assassination attempt. And I love that this is something that you can easily piece together on your own when you take a step back and really think about everything that's happened. When I ranked the chapters in book one, I mentioned that it was really neat how Jorah being a spy is revealed really early, but it's just brushed over so fast that you might actually miss it or even forget about it afterwards. Finally, the chapter ends with Dany deciding to stay in Meereen and learn how to rule. Maybe one day, if the series is finished, we can all look back at Meereen with a more positive opinion, but right now it just hurts knowing that she's still there. Number 48 is Jon 8. This is the second battle at the Wall where Jon is given command. Donal Noye takes a group down to defend the gate while Jon leads from the top of the wall. Not really much to add, it's just a solid action sequence and foreshadows the eventual election of Jon as Lord Commander. Number 47 is Arya 9. This is where Arya and Sandor are traveling to the Twins. There's the sequence of Sandor conning the ferryman to help them across the river, and this chapter is filled with peak Sandor dialogue, which is always a treat. Once we find out that he's taking Arya to the Twins and not King's Landing, the anticipation of a Stark reunion skyrockets, and the chapter ends with the infamous line of making it in time for, quote, your uncle's bloody wedding. Bravo, George. Number 46 is Arya 12. After 150 or so pages, we find out that Arya didn't die at the Red Wedding. She just got a concussion and probably permanent brain damage. This is Arya's first chapter after what was left of her family died, and she has no idea what she's supposed to do now. We also get a wolf dream where she finds Kat's body, which is just devastating. There's a sense of relief that at least Arya survived, but you wonder what's going to happen now. And we learn that Sandor wants to try and ransom her at the Eyrie, so now we're being set up for another potential Stark reunion, and we're left to wonder if it's going to go as disastrously wrong as the last one. Number 45 is Bran 4. This is the last Bran chapter in the original trilogy. The group reaches the Night Fort, and we get the story of the Night's King, as well as the Rat Cook, which is an obvious reference to Walder Frey's mockery of guest rights. Bran also meets Sam, and Sam is forced to swear that he will never reveal Bran is alive. As I mentioned earlier, I do wonder when that plot point will resurface and what the ramifications may be. Finally, Bran and friends reach the Black Gate, and Sam lets them through, handing them off to Cold Hands. When we get that scene of Hodor yelling his name into a well. Just perfect. Number 44 is Daenerys 2. We arrive in Astapor and we meet the Unsullied. We get to see firsthand the absolutely miserable life they have forced upon them, and it's written to be as cruel as possible, and it's just juxtaposed by the most over-the-top dialogue imaginable from crassness. Obviously, they couldn't hide Dany being fluent in Valyrian the way they did in the show, but this makes it even more funny as you realize that she understands every single thing being said, and we wonder what she'll do once that charade is finally up. And so we've reached the great tier, and we still have more than half the book to go. Storm is just that good, and just looking at all the chapters that are left, I can already tell this is going to be really difficult. Number 43 is Jon 2. Now that Jon is with the Wildlings, we get to learn more about them, and we get all of the outlandish stories about Tormund, including how he got the name Giantsbane. We also get to see that giants and mammoths are actually real and not just old man stories. Finally, Jon has to commit to playing the part of traitor by actually giving Mance some real intel at the Fist. Number 42 is Jaime 1. Yes, we finally reach the weakest Jaime chapter. It's fantastic, and we get the first glimpse of Jaime's internal monologue, which I think is one of George's greatest accomplishments in the series. Also, take a shot every time you read the word wench. A solid setup to the best arc in this book, and that is saying a lot. Number 41 is Jaime 3. This is the chapter where Cleos Frey dies and Jaime manages to get a sword and try to fight Brienne. It's interesting seeing him come to the realization that Brienne might actually be stronger than him, despite him being malnourished and out of practice. Finally, Jaime gets captured by the Mummers, and while some might have put this chapter much higher since this is where Jaime loses his hand, I think his later chapters where he has to process this information are even stronger. Number 40 is Catelyn 4. This chapter starts with Hoster's funeral, followed by the Starks getting news of Sansa's marriage to Tyrion and the sack of Winterfell. It's just blow after blow for them, and they realize that they basically have no choice but to accept the new proposal from the Freys. Number 39 is Jon 3, where Jon has the horrible task of breaking his vows in a cave. It is great development for Jon, and he has to try and figure out what direction he's going in. Obviously, Ygritte's idea of just staying in the cave forever isn't realistic, but he does find it tempting. It's just solidly written chapter. Number 38 is Jaime 6. I don't know if George already had this scene in mind when he wrote the lyrics to The Bear and the Maiden Fair, but the parallel is incredibly on the nose. So this is the chapter where Jamie decides to go back and save Brienne after having a fever dream. I do like how Jamie's arc isn't just him becoming a good person. Like, he still kind of just shrugs it off when asked why he would perform such a noble deed. This is also the last appearance of Vargo Hoat, Don't Let the Door Hit You on the Way Out, and of course we get the infamous Give My Regards to Robb Stark scene. Man, the clues were all just there. Number 37 is Sansa 4. This is the morning of the Purple Wedding, where Joffrey receives his wedding gifts, including a Valyrian sword and the book from Tyrion, which he promptly destroys. George really pumps up Joffrey's unlikability in these last few chapters since the character is about to die, but this chapter also has the semi-revelation that Joffrey may have been behind the Catspaw dagger, which still doesn't quite sit well with me and many others as well, but I guess we just kind of have to accept it. Number 36 is Tyrion 3. This is the first small council meeting of the book, and it's a solid one. The most important details are Littlefinger leaving for the Vale, which makes Tyrion master of coin. Tywin also decides to arrange marriages for Tyrion and Cersei, which really cements that he is the one calling the shots in King's Landing. Number 35 is Sansa 6. Here, Sansa and Littlefinger arrive at the Fingers, and it's interesting seeing how Littlefinger really came from the middle of nowhere and rose to be one of the most powerful people on the continent. We learn about how he and Olenna orchestrated the Purple Wedding, and then his decision to have Sansa pretend to be his daughter. It's honestly so transparent how he's just cosplaying as Catelyn's baby daddy here. And of course we get the comical "Oh Petire" scene, which if you've never heard the audiobook narration for that passage, you need to go give it a listen. Number 34 is Sansa 1. Here we get introduced to Olenna when Sansa sits down with her and Marjorie. Any scene with Olenna is fantastic, but I really love how they try to figure out whether any of the rumors about Joffrey are true, and Sansa is once again paranoid about what people's true intentions are. Her trust issues are just through the roof at this point. And while Olenna is the star of this scene, I also find Marjorie to be quite the enigma, as we're never quite sure if she's playing the game or not. I really hope we get a Marjorie POV at some point, even though the number of POVs is already staggering. Number 33 is Jaime 7. Jaime returns to King's Landing just after Joffrey dies. This chapter is mostly him reuniting with people. There's the comical scene of him and Cersei in the set, which was horribly recreated in the show. And there's the scene where Tywin tries to totally not take responsibility for bringing the Bloody Mummers to Westeros. And Jaime gets to meet all of the new Kingsguard members. And this is the beginning of him trying to figure out how a group of random nobodies like the Kettlebags have so much influence. Number 32 is Tyrion 5. This is the chapter where the Dornish delegation arrives, led by Oberyn Martell. The highlight of this chapter is Oberyn telling the story of how he met Tyrion as a baby, and Tyrion is left to wonder whether Oberyn is going to play the game or just flip the whole board over. Number 31 is Catelyn 3. This is where Rickard Karstark executes two hostages to get revenge on his sons being killed. Robb ends up beheading him, which was the least bad option, even if it meant alienating yet another ally. The Stark cause begins to look more and more hopeless, but Robb does what he can to maintain control. Also, this chapter has Catelyn's conversation with Jane and the comment on her hips, which gets contradicted in the next book, leading to a lot of far-fetched fan theories. Number 30 is Samwell 5. Here we have another chapter in the long sequence of wall chapters at the end of the book. The highlight here is Stannis just roasting Janos Slynt to his face, as well as announcing his plans, which include reclaiming the gift from the Watch and rearming the castles that have been abandoned. Finally, Samwell decides to be a schemer and lies to Cotter Pike and Dennis Mallister in a desperate attempt to have Jon become Lord Commander. I do love how Jon doesn't earn his post in the cleanest way possible, and this foreshadows the many fires he'll be putting out in the next book. Number 29 is Jaime 8. The last few Jaime chapters are him mostly coming to terms with his legacy. Here we have him going through the White Book as well as his first meeting with the Kingsguard as their Lord Commander, rightfully putting several of them in their place. Finally, he tries to convince Loras to talk to Brienne to see if he really thinks she could have killed Renly. This one's really great, and it works even better when paired with Jaime's last chapter. Number 28 is Daenerys 5. This is the first half of Dany's takeover of Meereen, and so much happens in this one. We get the fight between Meereen's champion and Strong Belwas, who finally gets to back up his talk with action. Then Meero tries to assassinate Dany, and we finally find out that Arstan is really Barristan. This one, combined with the revelation that Jorah was a spy, are absolutely devastating to her, and she puts them to work to prove their loyalty. As I said earlier, I do love how each of the three cities in Slaver's Bay has to get conquered in a completely different method. Number 27 is Jaime 2. While the first Jaime chapter establishes the storyline, this one goes much further into his internal monologue as he reflects on his time in the Kingsguard and his role in the death of Aerys. Even now we're saying that this might not have been as black and white as we would have been led to believe at the beginning of the series. As for the present day, we have Jaime, Brienne, and Cleos Frey arrive at the inn and meet the not innkeeper, who of course meets Arya soon afterwards. Number 26 is Davos 5. Just after the Red Wedding, Melisandre is already doing a victory lap, but Davos manages to convince Stannis that two of the three leeches isn't enough, as Balon's death was a freak accident, allegedly, whereas Robb kind of dug his own grave. The chapter ends with Davos resuming his reading lessons, which, even if this didn't lead to a crucial plot element, I do love that this is included. It'd be so easy for us to forget that Davos can't read, and we just pretend he never needs to. But the fact that Davos finds the letter from the Night's Watch, which was basically ignored, and this mirrors standing helping them out after every other king ignored them. I think it's a great parallel, and this further emphasizes how Davos is a fully fleshed out character rather than just the obligatory POV we would need in Dragonstone, which he easily could have been. Number 25 is Samwell 2. This is the mutiny at Craster's Keep, and it's crazy that scenes this good are showing up this low on the list because that just shows what the quality is like. Anyway, the Night's Watch rebel against the Lord Commander, killing both him and Craster. Gilly also gives birth, leading to Craster's wives convincing her and Sam to escape. This is the last time we see Lord Commander Mormont, and I've always thought it was really interesting how there's no real reason for the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch to be Jorah's dad, as the two storylines are completely disconnected at this point, but this is a conscious decision George made, and I'm curious what the implications will be further in the story. Number 24 is Tyrion 1. Tyrion's story begins with him finding out that the Gold Cloaks are no longer under his control and the mountain clans have all left, leaving him completely powerless. He meets with Tywin, and we get the incredible scene where Tywin denies him Casterly Rock and blames him for his mother dying in childbirth. It is such a well-written scene and sets up the Tyrion-Tywin rivalry as being one of the key storylines in the book. Number 23 is Jaime 9. This is Jaime's last chapter in the book, and he decides that there's still time for him to reshape his legacy. He decides to stay in the Kingsguard, and he gives Oathkeeper to Brienne, sending her on a near impossible journey to find Sansa. We also meet the fake Arya in this chapter, setting up one of the darkest storylines in A Dance with Dragons. It's crazy to see Jaime in this chapter compared to the beginning of the book. Still sort of an awful person, but we really understand what led him to this point, and over the course of a single book, he skyrocketed to being one of the best written characters in the entire series. Number 22 is Jon 11, where the main character in the series meets the best character in the series. Jon speaks with Stannis and is offered the title of Lord of Winterfell, something Jon has secretly always wanted but never dared to dream of. I love that the relationship between Stannis and the Night's Watch is immediately complicated, and they don't automatically become best friends just because they fought the Wildlings together. It's neat how the idea of Jon leaving the Watch already happened once at the end of the first book, but now he has this opportunity again, yet the context is completely different. Number 21 is Tyrion 6. This is the first chapter right after the Red Wedding, and it's basically explaining what just happened. We find out that Tywin worked with Roose Bolton and Walder Frey to organize this, and Tywin once again tries to justify war crimes. This chapter also has the great moment where Joffrey calls out Tywin for sitting out most of Robert's rebellion, and we get both the "any man who says I am the king is no true king," as well as "the king is tired." Both absolute banger moments from Tywin. We get to witness how the Lannisters basically won the war, yet somehow there's still like a third of the book to go, and oh man, there's so many great moments still ahead. Into the top 20, and like, this is like picking your favorite kid at this point. I don't know how I'm supposed to differentiate these. Number 20 is Jon 1. After 2 books of hype, we finally meet Mance Rayder, and even though there have been some hints of Wildling culture not having a hereditary hierarchy, it's really neat how Mance is literally just some guy. We also get to meet some of the Wildling side characters, including Tormund and Val, and we get a few stories from Mance. The fact that he allegedly left the Night's Watch just because he wanted to wear red again is just so funny to me. Like, he joined the Wildlings just for the drip. And I know some people find the idea of Mance sneaking into Winterfell at the start of the first book to be a bit far-fetched, but I don't find it that unrealistic, to be honest. And Jon using that as his cover story by saying, "Look how I was hidden away for being a bastard," is a nice touch. Great start to Jon's storyline. Number 19 is Arya 11. Again, the Red Wedding as a whole is perfect, but judging each individual chapter is a bit tricky. This is the one at the very end, and it's like 5 pages, and it's just Arya realizing that everyone's been murdered, and we get the very carefully written fake-out death of Sandor hitting her in the head with an axe, followed by like no Arya chapters for 150 pages maybe. Again, it's incredible, but there are longer, more meatier chapters that I need to place higher. Number 18 is Daenerys 3. Remains my favorite Dany sequence in the series, even though in the books we know that she's hiding the fact she can speak Valyrian, so we know she's not being 100% honest with Kraznys. We're not entirely sure if her offer to give away Drogon is legit, and George does a good job of letting us read Dany's thoughts and not find out she's planning on sacking Astapor without it seeming like an unearned twist. Dany also buys Missandei and gets a visit from Quaithe. And then we have the sack of Astapor, which is one of the most iconic scenes in the series. Number 17 is John 10. This is where John goes to treat with Mance and is basically tasked with trying to kill him. While it's been hinted at earlier, it's here that Mance basically spells out his intention to essentially settle the wildlings in the north, and it's increasingly clear that everyone is just trying to get away from the others. But negotiations are interrupted by the arrival of Stannis after we had almost forgotten that Davos' storyline had ended on that cliffhanger. A banger of a chapter that sets up the tense political web at the wall. Number 16 is the epilogue. So much happens in the second half of this book. Red Wedding, Purple Wedding, Tyrion's trial and escape, all of the stuff at the wall, and just as we're recovering from the revelation that Littlefinger and Lysop basically started the whole war, we wonder what could possibly happen now at the end of this book. Firstly, the inevitable civil war in House Frey is low-key one of the most interesting subplots heading into Winds, and I can't wait to see how that mess plays out. But the arrival of Lady Stoneheart is so shocking. We've seen Resurrection in this book, but it happened so long ago that we've almost forgotten about it, and everything we learned from Beric about pieces of him going missing with each return comes back, and we're left to wonder how much of Catelyn is really in here. Number 15 is Arya 6. This is the chapter where Beric fights Sandor Clegane. So firstly, this is one of the best written duels in the series, maybe only edged out by the one later in this book, but we finally get to see how it's possible that there are so many conflicting stories about Beric being killed and then he just shows up again. But spectacle aside, I really like this chapter for Arya's development, and she's been so beaten down throughout the story and has lost faith in everything, and now she's had this glimmer of hope, first in bumping into Harwin, and now the fact that one of the names on her list might get crossed out, and Arya's like, sure, I have a few moments to hear about our Lord and Savior R'hllor, only for that hope to be snuffed out when Sandor wins the trial. Number 14 is Sansa 5. Even after what we just witnessed, having Sansa just utter the phrase Joffrey is dead hits you like a wave. Dontos manages to smuggle Sansa out of King's Landing, and we find out that the person who orchestrated all this was Littlefinger. I also love how it isn't entirely spelled out, I don't think, but this explains how Tywin found out about the plot to marry Sansa to a Tyrell. Littlefinger just stepped in and stopped that from happening. And even though we're happy that Sansa is finally escaping from King's Landing, we're wary of Littlefinger and know that he would never do something just out of the kindness of his heart. Number 13 is Catelyn 5. One of my favorite parts of rereading Storm is always finding the little hints of the Red Wedding. There's the obvious symbolism in prophetic visions, such as the Lady in the Lake, but there's also things like 3 or 4 instances of guest rights being reiterated. If I recall, Jaime at the inn, Jaime at Harrenhal, and Jon with Mance. I don't know, I didn't write these down. There might be even more. And there's Tywin's seeming indifference to House Westerling betraying him. But then there's this chapter where the Starks are heading to the Twins, and Catelyn has a long, meaningful conversation with some of the Bannermen. Like, there's a huge lore dump about House Mormont, among others, and it's because a bunch of these people are about to die. In this chapter, we also get word that Euron has returned to the Eyre Islands, which means that Asha and Victarion are likely heading back, and the North may be less defended. Finally, we can rip on Catelyn one more time when she tells Robb to name thrice-removed Vale cousin number 23 as his heir instead of Jon, and Robb refuses. It's such a great moment, and although it's not explicitly stated who Robb named in his will at the end of this chapter, I think it is pretty obvious. Number 12 is Tyrion 9. This is Tyrion's trial, or at least the courtroom half of it. Tyrion gets absolutely demolished by all the testimonies, some of which are semi-true, such as Tyrion threatening to kill Joffrey and Tommen. Others, like Pycelle, are just completely fabricated. Not that it really matters in the end, but I am curious if Tywin was actually planning on letting Tyrion take the black. Similarly to Ned, I think Tyrion ending up at the wall is an interesting turn of events, but I guess it's not meant to be. The last witness in this chapter is Varys, who just reinforces that Tyrion should have executed half of the small council the moment he arrived at King's Landing. The chapter ends with Oberyn agreeing to be Tyrion's champion, and I, for one, didn't even consider that this could go wrong. Silly me. Number 11 is Sansa 3. This is Sansa and Tyrion's wedding. There are just so many horribly uncomfortable moments in this. There's the moment with Sansa refusing to kneel for Tyrion so he could put his cloak on her, and it's difficult to tell whether you can blame her for this. Yes, Tyrion is the least awful of the Lannisters in King's Landing, but at the same time, she's been gaslit so much that she can't really trust him. Then there's Joffrey's insistence on abetting and telling Sansa he'll still use her when he likes, and I feel like George knew Joffrey was dying in this book, so he decided to just pile on as much of the awfulness as possible. Then Tyrion threatens to gelt him, and finally, just when we think that Tyrion's a decent guy, we get the unfortunately vividly described bedroom scene. This chapter is just an absolute roller coaster of misery. All right, we're in the top 10, and it is one banger after another, just pure art. Number 10 is Jaime 4. This is Jaime's first chapter after losing a hand, and the psychological torment he's going through because of this is so uncomfortable as he tries to figure out what he even is without his sword hand. This chapter also has the first instance of Jaime saving Brienne, even though at this point I don't think he even realizes why he's doing it, and he's trying to cover it by saying he wanted to hear Vargo Hoat say Fafirth. Maybe that's meant to be a glimpse that Jaime still is in there somewhere, even if he seems depressed and ready to just throw his life away. Number 9 is Catelyn 6. Here, Catelyn, Robb and company arrive at the Twins. Why is Grey Wind so suspicious of the Freys? Why did Walder let Edmure marry one of his prettier daughters? Oh boy, so many questions. We're cautious, but once the bread and salt come around, we should be in the clear. Then it's just a matter of making it through this farce of a wedding and on to retaking the North. Roose Bolton also shows up, and we get confirmation that Theon is alive, although not exactly in one piece. I just love how many red flags there are around Roose Bolton, even going back to the first book. Robb was right to be afraid of him. This is an incredible chapter, and it kicks off maybe the most iconic sequence in the franchise. Number 8 is Jon 12. This is Jon's last chapter in the book, and I think it's fascinating how this comes full circle, and we get a flashback of Robb telling Jon he'll never be Lord of Winterfell. For all the love between the two of them, Jon always remembered this, even though Robb probably didn't mean any malice in it, they were just children. Jon once again decides to remember his vows and become Lord Commander after Sam convinces everyone to support him over Janos Slynt, which sets up the excellent Wall storyline in A Dance with Dragons. And I love this because, just as in the first book, the conventional thing would be for Jon to abandon the Watch and take his place in Winterfell, but instead he commits to the decisions that he made. Number 7 is Arya 13. Is there any gold in this village? Arya's last chapter is really dark. We already got that sense of hopelessness in the previous one, but here she murders the Tickler in one of the most satisfying deaths in the series. Arya gets Needle back and then abandons the Hound, but comes short of killing him, which may hint that she still has some humanity left in her, or it might be the exact opposite and she didn't want to be merciful. The book ends with Arya using Jaqen's coin to get on a ship to Braavos, as she basically has nothing left in Westeros, with all of her family either dead or presumed dead. Number 6 is Sansa 7. I always loved that this was the last regular chapter in the book. Like, easily it could have gone to Tyrion killing Tywin, or Jon or Daenerys remaining in their respective locations to command, but instead we have a Sansa chapter, which brings the whole war full circle. I really love the scene where Sansa builds a snow Winterfell, although Littlefinger and Sweet Robin both managed to ruin this moment in their own unique ways. If there was any doubt of how self-motivated Littlefinger is, it becomes blatantly obvious here. I also love Lysa's outburst afterwards, as her revealing that she and Littlefinger killed Jon Arryn and orchestrated the Stark-Lannister feud could have come off as expository, but here we see Lysa have an absolute meltdown that is very in character for her. The cherry on top is Littlefinger blaming her death on Marillion, good riddance there, and we're finally left to wonder how Sansa is going to get out of this situation now that she sees what Littlefinger really is. Number 5 is Jaime 5, and this is the best chapter that is mostly just people talking and doesn't have any insane moments or plot twists. Jaime's internal monologue had already hinted at what happened the night Aerys died, but here he flat out explains all of it to Brienne, although how much of that was him willingly venting and how much was just the trauma of him losing his hand is still up in the air. The idea that Jaime forsake his vows and killed Aerys to save 500,000 people, only to be immediately condemned for it, just adds so much depth to him. And this is followed by the fascinating dinner with him, Brienne, and Roose Bolton. Rereading this once you know that Roose is already planning on betraying Robb is really neat, and seeing both him and Jaime tiptoe around trying to figure out just what exactly the other one wants is a real fun read. This is a highlight of the best character arc in the book. Number 4 is Tyrion 8. This is the Purple Wedding chapter. I love how the revelation of the Valyrian dagger is used as a red herring in this chapter. There's this sense of dread as Tyrion fears that he might have figured out Joffrey was behind it and that his life might now be in danger. There's so many other great moments here. There's the dwarf joust, there's Olenna pointing out how horrible the Red Wedding was since we can't just kill each other at dinner, and then it's all capped off with Joffrey's death, which everyone has been waiting for since early in the first book, and just when it looks like the rest of this book is going to be a victory lap for the Lannisters post-Red Wedding, we're hit with this literally 100 pages after it. Number 3 is Tyrion 10. This one would have already been high on its own if it was just Shae's testimony at Tyrion's trial, but the duel between Oberyn and the Mountain just skyrockets this chapter, as it is the single best 1v1 fight in the franchise. And after so many big moments in the second half of the book, the idea that someone we basically just met could have such a shocking death almost seems laughable, especially since it almost certainly means Tyrion would die as well. And there's the implication that no matter how the duel pans out, it may mean even worse relations between the Lannisters and the Martells. Oberyn is such a memorable character for someone who literally only appears in a few chapters, and the amount of damage he causes at King's Landing in such a short time is incredible. Also, I 100% buy into the theory that he poisoned Tywin, but that's a topic for another time. Number 2 is Catelyn 7. What can be said about this chapter that hasn't already been said? It's the Red Wedding and it's perfect. But it's not just that two major characters die barely over halfway through the book. It's the realization that Robb trying to regain his honor and redeem himself after the mistake he made was an unwinnable game when the other side is stacked with immoral sociopaths like Walder, Roose, and Tywin. All of the warning signs, the poor musicians, Grey Wind being angry, the importance of guest right, the mayhaps game from the start of the second book, the horrifying behavior of Roose and Ramsay, all of it comes to a head. I've said before that I think the series' reputation for anyone can die is a bit overhyped, especially given that Ned, Catelyn, and Robb are the parents and older brother of most of the main characters, and these archetypes often die in stories, but it's such a spectacle and completely flips the narrative on its head. Not to mention that Arya was maybe a 5-minute walk away when all of this happened. And a moment like this is only as powerful as the consequences, and the ramifications of the Red Wedding echo through the series and will only get crazier in wins. But as iconic as this chapter is, there is one that is better. Number 1 is Tyrion 11. I knew this was going to be number 1 before I even started the list because this is the best chapter in the series. When this was adapted into the show, I actually saw this episode in a crowded theater, and the only reason I didn't walk out after I saw how they ruined it was because I wanted to see if the season would end with Lady Stoneheart. I know it sounds funny in retrospective, but yeah, this chapter is so perfect. The conversation between Tyrion and Jaime is incredible. The revelation that Tysha really was who she said she was, this all really ties together. What a horrible father Tywin was. Then we have Tyrion lying about Joffrey's death and setting up Jaime's paranoia regarding Lancel and Osmond and the Moon Boy. And then we have Varys' wait, stop, come back when he tells Tyrion exactly how to get to Tywin's room. Then Tyrion kills Shae, and finally, oh my god, 3 books of setup for a shit joke, and I can almost hear George laughing that laugh he does as he says Tywin Lannister does not shit gold. It's a perfect chapter in a perfect book in an almost perfect series. So yeah, that's the ranking for Storm, and next is Feast and Dance, which maybe I'll do those together, even though that video would be like an hour and a half long. But yeah, let me know what your favorite chapter was or what you disagree with. Thanks for watching.